jump right into that cauliflower soup recipe today. So that is our day 2 recipe. And again, just thank you all for showing up. This is step 1 for learning a bunch of new information and connecting with us. We're really going to try and keep this to 30 minutes today, maybe a little bit over, depending on how many questions we have. But we just really want to honor everyone's time. Elaina and I could talk for hours and hours about this stuff, so sometimes we just have to cut ourselves off. So today we're going to cover the types of sugar, what sugars are okay to eat if you're trying to go sugar-free. Are there any sugars that are okay to eat? I think that's a better question. And yeah, what you should really be staying away from, sort of those hidden sweeteners and stuff like that. Then we're going to go into a little bit of science behind sugar addiction, just like I talked about yesterday, knowing your why and understanding why you may be having, you know, this addiction or these cravings come up is really important to being able to work through them. So we're going to cover that today. And we're also going to talk about, you know, some of our top tips on not just like reducing cravings, but just not having them at all, or not having them run your life, because sugar, for so many of us, it kind of runs the show. It's something that we think about often. We're constantly thinking about our next snack we're going to have, or our next fix, as we like to call it. So that's something we're also going to talk about today. And just making sure everyone can hear. Looks like Anna can't hear, but it looks like everyone else can. And Elaina, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
One of those days, but you know, we all have one of those days from time to time.
Just one of those days. Well, it's only 6 minutes past. I just covered, you know, kind of what we're going to be talking about today, and just congratulating everyone for showing up and the people who did their recipes yesterday and posted them. That's awesome.
Yes, yes, exciting. It's exciting to see you guys posting stuff. I want to just take a minute. I think this is always a good thing to do every time before you begin something new, kind of like transitioning, is let's just close our eyes, feel our feet on the ground, and like take a deep breath. Hold it in, and then slowly breathe it out. Let's do that 2 more times. And 1 more time. And really hold it in at the top. And what that air does is it oxygenates your brain, it gets you in the here and now. And then also just taking a moment, even though we're on Zoom, to feel that heart coherence of each other, like seeing you guys there visually. I'm gonna do my gallery view so I can see all of you. Wow, so great to see you all here. And I mean, this is how we're connecting these days. So just like this beautiful coherence of just seeing these other eyes and these other faces, and you all look so beautiful. So thank you all for being here. Super exciting.
And today, if there's something that resonates with you, or you're just like, yes, that's me, or yes, more of that, just like do a little wave or some sort of motion that we can all see that we're all connected, because so many of us, we all feel the same things. And if we can see our faces and try to make this virtual world a little bit more connected, like that's what these calls are all about. So show your enthusiasm.
Yeah. I'm going to be making cauliflower soup pretty soon. Today we decided to kind of do it kind of closer to the front of the call. But before we get into the soup, which is absolutely delicious, it's actually one of mine and Caitlin's favorites. And every time, like I did it in the cleansing class, and every time people make it, they're like, it's so easy, but it's so good. So that's why we wanted to share this one with you, because we want to share with you, especially as fall is coming, like some really easy recipes that take hardly any effort. So I'm excited to show you guys that today. So let's talk a little bit about sugar, the kinds of sugar, and then a little bit, we'll kind of, as we're doing the recipe, we'll go into some different ways that we can overcome these cravings, because it's a big deal. Like, you know, if it was that easy, all of us would be, you know, not eating sugar, and all of us would be eating exactly the right food all the time. So there are a few things that you can do, little just things we can share with you that it's going to make it much more helpful than just like, I'm quitting sugar, you know, like it's more than that.
Yes, exactly.
So we kind of wanted to cover, and a lot of you guys know this, and some of you are new. So those of you who are new, like, what is sugar? When we say sugar, is that just white sugar? There's also people, a lot of times I hear them say, I eat really healthy, but I'm still having blood sugar issues, or I'm still, you know, gaining weight, or I'm still like, my mind is, you know, I've got brain fog. And it's like, so what is healthy? You know, so that's what we're kind of going to unpack right now is, you know, even if you're eating honey and, you know, you think, oh, that's super healthy, you know, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. And I'll just give like a kind of a example. So honey on the glycemic index, which goes from 0 to 100, stevia is 0, white sugar is 100. Honey is about a 65, 55 to 65, depending on the honey. That's pretty high. And so if you're using honey like all day long, like, oh, I'm just putting a scoop in my tea, or I'm just, you know, putting a little bit on my yogurt, or, you know, I'm just putting a little bit in this and that, it can add up. And so if you're thinking about every time you do a tablespoon, you're getting quite a bit of sugar in your diet. And if you're really truly wanting to let your body get a reset, even honey can be really imbalancing. And I know there's probably a lot of you out there who don't even eat honey because it's not considered a vegan product. But, you know, high quality honey that you would get from maybe farmer's market, or a local honey where you know the beekeepers are treating the bees well, they're not burning the hives, you know, is it different than buying like a Costco honey or just some lame honey at a grocery store. So there is a difference, and we do really need to care for our bees. Super important right now. I'm not going to go into all that right now, but bees are a big deal. And so if you are buying conscious honey, great. And then just using it in super moderation, like a tiny bit in a recipe with a boost of, with some stevia to boost the sweetness. So you get the little bit of flavor of honey, but not loading honey into everything because it's healthy. So that's really important. So a big one. And then agave is the next thing on our list. And I know a lot of people think, I eat healthy. I was actually just shopping with someone and he was buying a thing of agave, and I didn't say anything because I'm not here to tell people how to eat unless they come and ask me like you guys are doing. But agave, like I actually have a saying, which is friends don't let friends eat agave. And the reason for that is we all know about high fructose corn syrup. At least I hope we do. That's what's in most sodas, especially American sodas. And that's what's in a lot of our donuts and packaged goods. And not only is high fructose corn syrup addictive, it also is really hard on the liver. It makes the liver have to work really hard to process the fructose that's in there. Shouldn't use air quotes for that. There is fructose in that. But agave is very similar in structure, and people are like, well, it's natural, or, oh, but I buy the raw one. It comes from an agave plant, which is a cactus, and they cook it down and they take out the agave. And I know there's a process for doing it raw, but I'm not sure exactly how they do it raw. But anyway, when you test your blood sugar after eating agave, the proof is in the pudding. If you get something to test your own blood sugar, you'll notice that even though it's only a 22 in the glycemic index, which seems really low, something about the high fructose that's in agave makes your blood sugar spike, and it's really hard for your liver to process, and it causes weight gain and it causes sugar addiction. So we really want to get rid of agave. Sad to say that for anybody that's got it in your cupboard, but just get rid of it. Here's a mistake other people make too is, oh, well, I don't want to waste, right? How many times have we said that, or how many times have we heard that? I'm just going to finish this. I'm going to eat all this bowl of food, or I'm going to finish my agave, or I'm going to eat all my sugars because I don't want to waste it. Well, we're wasting our energy. We're wasting our future health. We're wasting, you know, like our mood. We could be in a great mood, and we're wasting all of that by eating a food that we don't want to waste. So just consider that. Maybe put it way back in the back of your storage for like a emergency situation where you're out of food, or give it to people that are still eating that food. You know, take it to places where someone else can use it, even though I really wouldn't wish that on anybody. So.
Right.
Yeah, and then the next one on the list is, well, there's a few, like maple syrup, of course, is another healthy sweetener because it's got minerals in it, and it's, you know, it's a healthy sweetener, but in very, very much moderation. And I'm talking about like a teaspoon in a recipe. Again, you don't want to put high amounts of these things in your food because they immediately will start getting you to crave sugar again, and especially a liquid sweetener like maple syrup. And I know for me, like once I start pouring a maple syrup on things, I'm like, and I just want more and more and more. And so, yeah, that's another kind of what we consider like very, very much moderation, or just cut it out for now, just for now. You know, so you don't have to throw away your maple syrup, just put it in the fridge and don't think about it for a while. And then the other one on our list is fruit and fructose. And I just covered fructose, but you know, you use like a can of apple juice as your, you know, they make the frozen canned apple juice and you use that as your sweetener and things, or frozen orange juice. I grew up using concentrated orange juice and like making my own orange juice. Well, anything that has its fiber removed, like orange juice or concentrates, are going to be also very high in fructose, which causes weight gain. And especially when there's no fiber, the blood sugar just spikes immediately because there's nothing to slow down that sugar uptake. And again, for me, I just kind of get like my spine kind of starts to get the creepy crawlies if I eat stuff like that. Dates are in that category. Dried mangoes, really high fructose dried fruits, raisins, things like that. And I'm not saying you can never have that, but just for now, put that on the back burner. You know, and if you're going to have something like goji berries, you want to soak them first and get like, you know, maybe don't use the water, kind of get some of that sugar out of them. And goji berries are a lower glycemic fruit that you could use in things that maybe usually call for raisins.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to say on that one, Caitlin?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think just the difference between the fruit juices and the fruit, like dates, of course, they still have their fiber, but they are still high on the glycemic index. And like you said, any dried fruit, of course, it still has fiber, but it's concentrated and all that water is out of it. So being mindful of your dried fruit consumption, and then try and just cut out fruit juices altogether, especially if that's something that your kids or your grandkids love, like really trying to steer away from those fruit juices, because that is like ADD waiting to happen. That's just like an instant blood sugar spike and then an instant crash. So yeah, being mindful of those.
Yeah, and we're not anti-fruit. Like instead of the apple juice for your kid, cut up an apple. They love cut apples, like dipped in almond butter or something. You know, like berries or grape, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. Strawberries are a little sweeter, but you know, blackberries. And right now they're in season, right? The end of summer. You know, this is a great time to eat those. So we do encourage that, and we teach you guys in our month-long course how to make a coconut yogurt that's really basic and super easy to make, and so things like that. So we're not against fruit, but we just want you to keep it on the lower glycemic index. And when I eat blueberries or raspberries, it doesn't make me want to eat like tons of them. Like I'm really satisfied, especially if I'm eating them in their whole form, just like right out of the container versus blending them or making them into something. I think whole foods, whole fruit in their whole form, like eating the actual apple, is way more satisfying than making it into an applesauce. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of questions on what is the right sweetener. So before we get into those, all of these questions are so valid, but the last one we really want everyone to just completely cut out, besides agave, is the fake sweeteners. And I'm talking about the aspartame, the diet sodas. Those all actually lead to insulin resistance because they still are spiking that blood sugar, even though there's said to be no sugar in them. So what is it? Aspartame? What's the other ones?
Well, there's things like sorbitol and maltitol, those, anything, you know, like that.
Yeah, like the sweet and lows that you can get like at coffee shops or whatever, those are just, they're chemicals and they're really, really not good. So those ones you really, really want to stay away from. But some of the ones that we approve of in moderation, of course, are the low glycemic sweeteners. So when we're talking about the glycemic index, things like coconut sugar, which is, I think it's about a 30 to 35 on the glycemic index. So it's, you know, that's pretty low. So the coconut nectar is the same thing. Coconut sugar, coconut nectar. I saw a question about that, so I'm just reiterating that. And then go ahead.
Usually we use coconut sugar if I'm making like a brownie and I want to like make it a little bit have that flavor, I'll put like a couple tablespoons of coconut sugar in the whole recipe, and then I'll use stevia, which we keep mentioning, to boost that flavor of the coconut sugar. So we love stevia as a booster. If you don't love the taste of stevia, you can use a little bit of coconut sugar and just a small amount of stevia to boost it and make it taste better. And salt also does that. A pinch of salt or a half a teaspoon of salt in a sweet recipe will up the sweetness of the food. Cinnamon, nutmeg, things like that also boost the sweetness.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm seeing some questions about erythritol. So that is another sweetener that we approve of. It's an alcohol sugar, so it bypasses the liver. Elaina, you can explain this a lot better, but we're okay with erythritol. The only issue with some people with erythritol is if you do have a sensitive gut, it can cause some gut disturbance. Elaina and I don't really use it a lot, or we use like a tablespoon in a recipe to just like boost the sweetness. So that would be something like Lakanto. If you've ever heard of that brand before, they use erythritol and something called monk fruit, which is also really low in the glycemic index. And so instead of that maple syrup, I saw a question about that. What do I use in place of it? The Lakanto brand actually has a maple syrup substitute, which they've made with their erythritol. So that could be something to try. So those two are the good low glycemic sweeteners.
Yeah, and so I'm one of those people that doesn't process erythritol very well, but I can use, like you said, Caitlin, a tablespoon in a whole recipe. My body does better on stevia. But like some of us can eat erythritol or Lakanto, which is the monk fruit with erythritol, and have zero gut issues and just feel great. When you're new to it, you could have something called disaster pants, which means just it moves through your gut really quickly. So just ease yourself in. And even if you're on this program and you're like, I don't think I can give up my maple syrup yet, or my, my this or my that, like just start cutting back on it and maybe boosting up the stevia, or trying a little bit of erythritol. Like if it called for a quarter cup of maple syrup, maybe put, 2 tablespoons of erythritol and 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, just to like start easing yourself out if you're someone who just doesn't want to go cold turkey. And I hear you, like there's all kinds of people. Some of us are cold turkey, jump in with both feet. Some of us have to like test the waters. So just the biggest thing I could say about the sweeteners is to try it out on yourself. And tomorrow I'm going to be making a cookie dough recipe, and we'll talk about the Lakanto more there. And I'll use a little bit of stevia, and I'll show you kind of how to make a cookie recipe with stevia and Lakanto.
And Diane asked, so what would I use instead of agave? Coconut nectar would be a really great replacement for agave if you're really just wanting to go lower glycemic. And then again, the erythritol.
Yeah, exactly.
So Lakanto. And someone asked about monk fruit. Monk fruit is great. It's also, it's a prebiotic, or wait, is that?
Yeah, it's a fructooligosaccharide, which is a prebiotic. It feeds, so prebiotics feed the good bacteria in your gut. So prebiotics are things like jicama, fructooligosaccharides, things like monk fruit has that. Even asparagus has a little bit of prebiotics. So there's certain foods that have that in them. And so that's why we like the monk fruit. And it's also called Lohan Guo is another name for it. Some people call it Lohan, and you can buy straight up monk fruit. Some people just use just the monk fruit, but it's a very strong flavor. I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's like anything, if you do too much of it, you're like, I don't really like it. So, you can buy the straight up monk fruit. It's going to be more money, but you probably don't need much. And you can even use something called Sweet Drops by a certain company and use that in your tea. And people love it, that taste. It's kind of like makes the tea taste really flavorful. But drops, not spoonfuls.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why we love stevia, erythritol, and monk fruit is because the point here is that we're not trying to spike our blood sugar, because the more we're spiking our blood sugar, the more our body has to work and create that insulin. And we all know the issues with the overproduction of insulin and insulin resistance. So that's really the message we're trying to get across, because I see we have some questions about the stevia and the erythritol, if that causes responses like blood sugar, because it is giving our taste buds the sweet taste. It's sending that message. But if you were to test your blood sugar after having a stevia sweetened treat, it would not spike it at all. So that's really where the proof is in that one.
Yeah, and I mean, some people do have issues with stevia. So if you're one of those people, and I doubt anybody on this call is one of those people, because you probably would have given up all of it by now already. But some people feel like I've got to just even give up stevia in order to really get over the sugar addiction. I've kind of gone off and on stevia over the years, and I've been using it for 22 years and never had any issues with it as far as physically or blood sugar. And I do test my blood sugar often. And we can get into that too, maybe just quickly, that your blood sugar, like a healthy blood sugar, is somewhere between 70 and 90. And that should be a fasting blood sugar, like the first thing in the morning. You test it before you eat anything. And then your blood sugar should only spike 10 to 20 points after you eat. So if my blood sugar is at 90, then I eat something, maybe something with stevia in it. If it jumps more than 20 points, then you've got a problem. Like you need to go like, oh, maybe I need to not do that. But usually stevia won't make your blood sugar jump. But it's good to start testing yourself. And we teach this in our month-long training and our Keto Green Line, how to test your blood sugar, because the only way to know is to track yourself. And whenever it's called quantifying. Whenever we're quantifying, like when I eat this, my blood sugar does that, you really start to get a sense of it. And you can buy a super cheap blood sugar tester for like $10 with the stuff. And, you know, there's videos online on how to test your own blood sugar. It's super easy. And I recommend doing that if you're wondering about stevia or any of the sweeteners.
Yeah, and you know, we know that blood sugar imbalances cause not only diabetes and insulin resistance, but things like PCOS and other autoimmune issues and inflammation. So that's why we're really trying to hone this in. And I'm going to answer a few more questions and then we'll get into the recipe. So Nico asks, can you substitute for mesquite powder? Mesquite powder is a really great natural sweetener. So if you don't know what that is, it's a very cooling pod. It grows in the desert where I am, and it's used as a flour replacement, and it has a really nice like graham cracker flavor. So if you're making like the cookie recipe tomorrow and you wanted to up the sweetness in that, mesquite powder would be a really great one for that.
Yeah, and there's another one called lucuma or lucuma, which is a little bit sweeter than mesquite, but it's way less sweet than like coconut sugar. Lucuma, lucuma. And we talk about that a lot in our course, but that's another sweetener substitute that's from a whole food. It's actually from a dried fruit, but it's a very low glycemic fruit. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like caramely in your food. Like people put these and stuff.
And then Carol asks, are you saying you prefer coconut sugar or its liquid form, which is coconut nectar, over a date which still has its fiber and minerals intact? So the difference between coconut sugar and coconut nectar is it's lower on the glycemic index. It's about a 35, where a date is quite high. So if you're using dates to sweeten, maybe if you're trying to cut back on sugar, you could use half dates, half coconut sugar, just to lower that glycemic index. Or try coconut sugar and coconut nectar. It's got a really, really great flavor that kind of mimics that date flavor.
And then the answer to that question is test your blood sugar. One day try a smoothie with a date in it, and the next day try a smoothie with 1 tablespoon of coconut sugar, and see which one makes your blood sugar spike more. That's the only way to tell. For me, I cannot eat dates. They make my blood sugar go through the roof. They make me feel really ungrounded. Even one date and my teeth hurt, and it's just not a good thing. Yes, they are a natural food, but they're basically a dried fruit, which is super high in sugar.
Mm-hmm. And Diane asks, is lucuma the maple syrup? No, lucuma is usually comes in a powder form.
Yeah, totally different thing. Yeah, it's from a whole food, and it's just ground into a powder from a fruit called lucuma fruit.
Well, why don't you get into the recipe, and we can continue answering questions as they come through.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a medium saucepan, and I'm going to heat up. So coconut oil is your best oil for heating. It can stand a temperature of 350 degrees. I'm just going to give you a couple tips here. When you go on high on your burner, that's over 400 degrees. Medium heat is probably right around 300, so you're safe. Medium to low heat. Don't crank your burner, because you're going to burn your oil, you're going to destroy it, and it's going to become like a trans oil, which is bad for us. It's like a fried food. So I'm just going to start by heating up this coconut oil on medium heat. And my burner burns quite hot, so I'm just going to put it on kind of low. Then the next thing I'm going to do is just take a stalk of celery. I like celery as a base in this soup, and you can just, mince it up into like a little thin pieces. A lot of people do too big of chunks when it comes to stuff like this. Think about the celery as being almost like your onion in the pan. I'm not going to use onion in this recipe today. It's garlic for flavoring, but you're welcome to use maybe like a quarter of an onion. Some of you have done our Keto Gone Green course, you'll notice we don't do a lot of onion, or if we do, it's only like a quarter of an onion, because onion actually has kind of a high carb index. It's quite high in carbohydrates. So my oil is melted, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that celery in. And then I've got 2 cloves of garlic, and you can either crush them or you can chop them up. I've just got a garlic press, so I'll go ahead and just put that in and get everything. So this is like our little base that we're making here. And celery and garlic are just like an amazing thing together. I love the flavor of them. All right, so then the next thing we're going to do, and I left the cauliflower whole because I kind of want to show you how I do it. I took all the big green leaves off, and then I washed it to make sure it's clean. Make sure you check it and make sure there's no black spots. The black spots are actually mold. So in the store, you want to check your cauliflower. Make sure you're not buying ones with brown or black spots. That means it's already starting to break itself down. So the whiter, the better. And then,
can you tilt your board or your computer down? We just need to see your board a bit better.
Yep, let me get on my step stool. Oh yeah, you guys can't even see my board. Sorry about that. We'll just cut my head off. That's okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Here? Okay.
Yes.
All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of cut around that inner core of the cauliflower. You can use the inner core, but for this, I'm just kind of cutting it out because it's all like just the fibrous part. I'm going to compost that. I have a compost, so everything goes back to the compost. And then we don't want any of those green leaves in there. We just want the cauliflower. You can do it a couple different ways. Sometimes it's easy just to break it up with your fingers and make it into little florets. So we're going to blend most of the soup, but some of it will stay whole. So we don't want big, huge chunks in there because you don't want that, like when you're eating your soup, you don't want to bite into a big chunk. Or maybe you do. I don't know. We're all a little bit different. I like my soups more on the pureed side and just a few little chunks in there. Some people like really chunky, like hearty soup that you can bite into the vegetables. Totally a personal preference. And you could also, if you're wondering, you could do this with cabbage, you could do this with broccoli, any like these, those are considered cruciferous vegetables. Those are super good foods to feed your probiotics in your gut too. They're super good, healthy, fibrous foods. And they're very low carbohydrate, very low glycemic. All right, so I've got all of my cauliflower ground up pretty well, pretty happy here. And I'm gonna get this pan, and it looks like things are starting to brown. So I'll bring it over and see it's starting to brown up a little bit there. I might be rushing it just a little bit, but that's okay. And then I'll just put all the cauliflower in. So far we've only got 3 ingredients in this soup. It's pretty basic. That and the coconut oil. If you don't like coconut oil, you are welcome to use olive oil or avocado oil in this. Some people just don't like coconut oil. The next ingredient is coconut aminos. So coconut aminos are similar to coconut nectar, but they've been fermented, so it eats the sugar out of it. So it's a pretty low glycemic food, and we're only using a tablespoon of it. You could also use wheat-free tamari if you don't want to do the coconut aminos. Some people can't do soy, so this is a good substitute. And it just makes a really good flavor in your soup. So a tablespoon of that. And then tarragon. Some people love the taste of tarragon and some don't, but you could also use Italian seasoning or any herb. I mean, not any, like I wouldn't use mint, obviously, but you know, any like savory herb, like sage or whatever, about a teaspoon of that. And then I've got a teaspoon of rosemary powder. And if you don't have rosemary powder, you can just put in chopped fresh rosemary, like a little bit more than a teaspoon probably. And I'm gonna add the water now, and then we're gonna just put it back on the stove to simmer. It's just that easy. It's just that easy, man. Put the lid on it. And then by the magic of magicness, it's done. I cooked one up ahead of time. So you know it's done if you taste a piece and it's kind of tender. We have on there to add salt to taste, so you might be a person that likes it a little saltier. I tend to be someone that likes things a little saltier. One salt that's awesome is called fleur de sel, also known as Celtic salt. It's kind of a gray salt, and it comes like it's in big pieces. It's not the cheapest salt on the market, that's for sure, but it's a really neat salt. The other one is called real salt. It's by a company called Redmond real salt, and that's from Utah, so it's actually local. And the reason we use these kinds of salt versus sea salt is like you can buy super cheap sea salt, but the minerals have usually been taken out of those. These are super mineral rich. Salt should have only over 92 minerals in it, so it's not actually going to cause high blood pressure when you're using the right kind of salt. It's actually going to mineralize your body. Anybody who's spent any time in the desert knows you need salt. You need salt to stay hydrated. If you're eating the wrong kind of salt, it makes you puffy and it makes you like bloated. But if you're eating the right kind of salt, your body will actually use up those minerals. So now what I'm going to do is just pour in. I'll show you this way so you can kind of see my skillet. Most of it. And it's just up to you how much you want to leave in the pot. I'm going to leave about that much. Can you see? Not that much in the pot. I'm going to blend this up. Any blender will work for this. I have a Vitamix. And I'm going to puree it. Then all I'm going to do is mix it back in. It's just so easy. And we don't use potatoes in this. For some reason, I just heard the question, can I use potatoes? Potatoes are pretty high glycemic, especially when you cook them up and puree them. So we're not using potatoes in this, but it almost seems like a cream of potato soup. You could put leek in there as well if you wanted, like chop up a leek and cook that in. And it could be like almost like potato leek soup, but this is cauliflower soup. So you can get very creative in how you make the soup. And then we just get like a little bowl here. This is a perfect lunch alongside your salad, or it could be a great dinner. This recipe will probably serve 4, easily serve 4. And you've got this wonderful soup, and you can, I do have on the recipe that you could add kale. You can either add the kale and cook it in. These are all actually from my garden. These are different kinds. This is a Russian kale, a red leaf kale. I've got dinosaur kale. I just picked them like literally an hour ago. And you could just mince those up small, and the heat of the soup will kind of cook it down. So you could add that as like this is called a chiffonade, a super fine ribbon cut. If you don't want to use kale, you could also use spinach in this. You could use basil. I'm not going to put it all in this one, but you could top your soup with it. You could put cilantro on top. Really, any green would work. And again, you don't have to use the green. You could also sprinkle some pumpkin seeds on top or something like that, anything crunchy. Some seaweed, if you like nori or dulse, you could put some of that in there. Really, the sky's the limit. You could also put sauerkraut. I know someone mentioned yesterday that they saw me do a kimchi video. You could put a little scoop of kimchi or sauerkraut in there. That's going to add probiotics to your diet. It's going to like help you digest your food. So lots of different things you can do with it to just kind of get creative. But I would suggest doubling this recipe and just having it around, because it'll last about 4 days in the fridge. And then just reheat that for lunch or dinner. I love having soups on hand, and they actually get better as the days go on. They get more flavorful. Do we have questions, Caitlin?
Yeah, so if you can't have oils, you could saute your veggies just in water or in veggie broth. That would be really flavorful. And then Estella asked if she could add cashew cream or another sauce to the soup. So if you wanted to even add like a coconut cream or I guess cashew cream, or we have a macadamia cream recipe that would be really hearty and good in this recipe too. Kind of goes with the same colors and flavors.
Exactly. And I mean, yeah, in place of the veggie broth, you could use your favorite milk. And like we make our own milk using a nut milk bag, but I know you can buy it. You can buy some healthy boxed milks. Just be sure it's not one with a lot of ingredients. If there's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 ingredients in your boxed milk, it's probably not super healthy. You're better off just making your own at home and blending that. Or a coconut, like a can of coconut milk is also a great one to add in instead of the water. That'll make it really creamy, really flavorful.
Yeah, boxed milks are one of the ways that you can get some hidden sugar. So make sure there's no sugar in any of those milks if you're getting those. And then Kathy asked, can you use an immersion blender for this? Absolutely, that would be just fine. Elaina left a few of the chunks in there just to give the soup some texture, but you could blend just the whole soup as well. And let's see, did you heat the soup in the Vitamix? No, she didn't. So she pre-made a soup and then she's cooking the other soup. So you're probably going to cook that soup. Oops.
That one's still cooking. If you can see the burner on, so I cooked it it's in the recipe. If you look at your recipe, it says cook for 20 to 25 minutes. So just follow the recipe that we gave you. Hopefully you guys all got that.
We just didn't want you guys waiting around while the soup cooked.
Yeah, I cooked it ahead because I can't stand here for 25 minutes and watch the soup cook. I guess I could, but that would be boring.
And then Jackie asked, I have a small cauliflower and was considering adding a couple branches of broccoli also. Do you think that would work? Absolutely. Yes, that would be delicious.
Yes. And you could even put like anything you've got on hand. It doesn't have to be cauliflower broccoli. You could make a beautiful cabbage soup, like I said. If you're at the store and something looks really amazing, asparagus, anything like that, like just use about the same amount and it's going to be delicious. It's just a good ratio soup. So some people aren't big fans of cauliflower.
Yes. And Diane says, wonderful with cashew and almond cream. And if you didn't have any cashew or almond cream made, you could throw in some soaked cashews or macadamia nuts or soaked walnuts to give it just a little bit more creamy and heartiness.
Yeah, exactly. And we prefer the raw nuts over the roasted and salted nuts, because when you roast and salt nuts, they're going to be way more like processed. It's almost like a fried food in a way. And so, yeah, you're always better off starting with the raw. Even if you're cooking it, in your pot, it's different than when they do the roasted somewhere in a factory with all that salt, and we don't know what kind of salt they're using.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I want to cover a couple things before we go today, because I know like our hour goes up quickly. Just a few things that you can utilize right away. If you're like on this call today and it's already your second day of being sugar-free, you've decided to go for it. Some things that have really helped me over the years is what we call future pacing. Well, actually, first, let's talk about finding your why. Do you want to talk about that one, Caitlin?
Yeah, I'm just answering some questions. Someone asked if we could use cayenne pepper or black pepper in this, and that would also be super yum.
Super yum.
So, okay, sorry, say again.
Just talk about finding your why, like I'm talking about some of the ways to stay off sugar.
Yeah, so I briefly mentioned this yesterday, and I asked you all to take a breath and find your why for wanting to get off sugar. But I think that's like one of my top tips for really making this lifestyle happen for you, is always continuously coming back to your why. And we do this in our month-long program, is starting a journal or a food journal and writing your why at the beginning of that, and going back to that every time you're having a craving. Like, instead of going to the fridge or going to the cupboard, like go back and find that page where your why is and reread it again, and like recheck in with yourself and recheck in with your goals. I think that's a really important one. Besides all the other things that you can do, like that is the simplest one you can do, and it's free.
Yeah, and I have like a behind me, I don't know if you can see this cupboard I'm pointing to here. I open it up and I have a couple yellow stickies because I take my supplements every morning. So wherever you're going to be going, like your bathroom mirror is a great place, just a little yellow sticky of like why you're doing this, you know, like what is your why? Like, I want to feel healthy and vibrant. Good things come my way, you know, whatever it is for you that you're going to go, yeah, I'm going to stick with this because I do really want to feel good again and not feel so tired all the time, and whatever that is for you. And then the next thing is future pacing, which kind of plays right into this, because future pacing is where, for me, this really helped me in the beginning, because when I first started on raw foods and just eating healthier, I'd be on the beach walking by all these stands with all these amazing smells coming out of them, and maybe a friend would be like, let's get an ice cream, or let's get this. And I would future pace in my mind, go, okay, if I eat this ice cream now, how am I going to feel in an hour? Yeah, I'll probably feel a little bit guilty, and I probably won't feel that good. And then, like, how am I going to feel the next day? I'm going to probably just feel sluggish and almost like a food hangover if I eat, or especially if it's something unhealthy like a hot dog or something. Like, future pace, like, just all you have to do in your mind is fast forward. So 5 minutes of delicious tasting compared to like what the after effects are. So that might be something for you that works really well. I know that always worked really well for me. Like, how do I want to feel this afternoon? And again, people are like, hey, you want a mimosa at brunch? And it's like, no, because I'll be sleepy all day. Like, it's absolute no. I'm never tempted by that, because my day is shot if I have a mimosa. Like, forget it. No, thank you. So there's certain things for me that I know just do not work. And so that's the future pacing thing. It's like, yeah, it might taste good, but And even if it's like, oh, well, everyone else is doing it, it's like, no, I'm good. Like, get me a carbonated water, like sparkling water. You can go to any restaurant and get sparkling water with a little lime or lemon in it. And that's a great trick. Everybody else is drinking their sugary alcohol drinks or whatever. You just get your sparkling water with a little lemon or lime and kind of drink along with everybody.
Mm-hmm. And when 2 hours go by and you didn't have the thing and you're feeling great, you'll thank yourself, and you won't even think about the temptation that came up in that moment.
Well, you know what always happens too with me is people are inspired. They're like, wow, you have such willpower. I'm like, no, it's actually not willpower, but like they get inspired. Like, and I've had people actually that I know that message me, I'm going to stop drinking. Like, like they want to tell you their true confessions, because you're inspiring them by not doing it. And the reason I'm bringing up drinking is because it does have a lot of sugar in it when you're drinking. Unless you're drinking like straight vodka, you're going to get a lot of sugar in it. And then the next thing is that just the last thing we'll kind of cover today, and then we'll open it up to questions, is that willpower doesn't work. And we kind of touched on this briefly yesterday. But what that means is that we only have a certain amount of willpower. So if you wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm not going to have that donut this morning, or I'm not going to have the sweetener, like the maple syrup on my oatmeal, or whatever it is that you usually do, you've already used up some of your willpower. And they use this example of being in a line at like a coffee shop, where you go by like, oh, first you see the orange juice. Okay, I didn't grab that. I usually do. And then the next thing you come to is like, there's pastries. Oh, okay, didn't do that. Then you look at the cookies. Oh, nope, I'm so good. I'm such a good girl. And then you get to the register and that chocolate bar is sitting there, or the chocolate covered nuts or whatever. And you're like, you just used up all your willpower in line. And so you're like, oh, you know, just a little bag. So, because you feel so good about yourself for having done that. So instead of using willpower, because it's futile, we cannot get through like maybe a day or two or even a week on willpower, but then eventually it catches up with us. So instead we do what's called an if-then scenario. If I want this sugary cookie, first I'm going to do 20 jumping jacks. Like you've already decided in your mind what your if-then is. If I want to eat this cookie, first I have to call my friend who's also doing this program, and we have to talk about it. And I'm not saying I can't have it. Like, I don't think you should say, no, you can't have that. Just say, it's if-then. Like, I want that, but let me first do 10 deep breaths. And I hold the breath at the top, and I let it out. Or first I'm going to take my dog for a walk around the block. You just have something you do. It's a delayed gratification. And what happens, and it doesn't happen every time, but 80, 90% of the time, you talk yourself out of it on the walk, or you start feeling better because you did, like when you do physical exercise, whether it's jumping on a rebounder or doing push-ups or just quick little bicycle sit-ups on the floor, or you jumping jacks, whatever it is, you kind of lose your hunger. And a lot of times when we want a cookie, it's not hunger anyway. It's just wanting to entertain ourselves. You could even say, instead of a cookie, I'm going to watch, you know, something that I've been wanting to watch, like a YouTube video, an educational YouTube video on health or on putting sugar or whatever it is. So like we just do an if-then scenario with ourselves. And I found that that's worked really well. And also hiding those things from yourself. So instead of having them, and this even works to keep it in the car. Like if hubby has to have cookies, then have him keep them in the car. Like when you wanted cookies, can you go out the car and eat them? I mean, if they really want to help you, they will. Or keep them in the garage on the top shelf, or whatever for you feels the hardest to get to. It's like, it's too much of a pain to get to that. Or just don't bring them into the house. So another trick is like, okay, when I want an ice cream, I'm going to make sure it's the healthiest version, but I'm not going to bring it home. I'll have whatever I want when I go out, and then I just don't bring it home with me. Because usually we have really great willpower till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And that's like from 9 to midnight is like that bewitching hour where it's like anything that's not nailed down, you're just going to eat. And you don't even, the next morning you're like, who was that person? Have you guys experienced that? Like, who was that beast? That wasn't even me. So if it's not around, you can't have it. And then you'll learn to make our sugar-free cookie dough balls tomorrow. So that'll be a great substitute. So the other thing is having, instead of saying with willpower, no, you can't have it, just say, well, I'm not going to have a regular cookie, but I can have my cookie dough balls. Or I can have, you know, that drink that we made yesterday, the elixir, the tonic. That usually kills your appetite really quickly. So just substituting things out.
Mm-hmm. Or having like a high-fat snack, like a handful of olives or something. That'll really satiate you without giving you that sugary spike.
Yep, exactly. Right. I'm going to turn this off, but I reheated, just to let you guys know, I reheated the soup just a little bit, and now it's a little bit creamier, and the kale got cooked down. So I was kind of thinking I probably don't want to, especially in the fall, I don't want to eat this big raw kale chunk. So I reheated it, and it got creamy just by reheating it. So
yummy. Okay, well, awesome. Before we go, I just want to say, I hope everyone can make this soup and take your pictures. I see there's been a lot of you who have added your name to that spreadsheet, but if you're wanting to join the challenge and get in on some of those bonuses and prizes, be sure to add your name to that sheet and at least try and make one of these recipes this week. I think that's a really good goal. If you can make all three, more power to you. And this is a great lunch or dinner recipe. And tomorrow, like Elaina said, we're going to be making you a treat so you can have that substitute on hand. These are some of my favorite little cookie dough balls. I cannot keep them in my house because my partner just eats them all. And they're using sugar-free chocolate chips. So they're just a really, really nice treat without the guilt. So we'll see you all tomorrow. And if we didn't answer your questions today, I saw a lot of things coming through. So thank you so much for using that chat and participating. But if there's some burning question that you really didn't get answered, be sure to ask it on that Facebook group. We also have so many people on there who are real experts in all of this stuff too, like Jules. Thank you, Jules, again for answering so many questions today. But really, those questions will get answered on that group too.
Yeah, we appreciate our veterans answering stuff on the chat because, as you know, we're talking and we can't always get to it. But Jules, thanks for that. And whoever else, I think Diana was answering some stuff too. So thanks, you guys.
Mm-hmm. And a question about the spreadsheet. It's an open sheet, so you should be able to just type your name in there. I see someone, Diane, had trouble with the spreadsheet. So It is open. People have already used it, so you just type your name under the name side of the sheet.
Well, we'll see you guys tomorrow at 2, making cookies. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And the replay will be sent out soon, so if you missed any of it. And Sonia, I see you're already ready to get in your kitchen. I can't wait to see your soup. I love it. Awesome. Bye, everyone.